So we'll continue the day, in this track, and especially about a topic that's extremely important to follow it a little bit what Sol and I have said this morning, which is, of course, the governance aspect, the governance of the APIs, the data, and the governance of the whole organizations. So, and for that, I'm really glad to have Sue Jella with us. So, Sue, let's have a seat, right, and let's have this discussion together. So, governance is an important aspect, and it's true that you are recognized one of the leaders, on that topic, like data and AI, data and AI leaders. And let's say, can you tell a little bit more? Can you tell us a little bit more about you, but also about like how, let's say, you face many complexity challenges.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you for having me here. Hi everyone. I know it's always hard after a coffee break. You want to be here at coffee a bit longer. But anyway, thanks for having me. So my experience extends out to about 15 years of data analytics, governance, AI experience. And I've done a fair bit of that in different ways, using AI, automation, different technologies, building out capabilities where we can understand our data a lot better, providing insights, but more importantly, helping to drive those strategic decisions. So of course, governance is a very important topic to me. Data doesn't make sense if you don't have good governance. And so it's really important that you have those fundamentals, the structures, the standards, as well as the best practices in place when building out data capability.
And so, you have been rewarded many times, as recognized as a impact data innovator, and like you are in the Women in AI Pacific Association.
Yeah.
So this discussion is really about like what we've called the data from data swam to data symphony, right? So I like, and especially because a lot of, let's say, software experts, API experts that I know, some are even major in music, musicians, because the symphony is actually, I really like this term about like, orchestra and synchronization and let's say alignment, So, and governance is a little bit all of this, right?
Yep, that's right. So
we're in an API conference where we talk about how to be ready for AI. So API and AI governance is really key. So the thing is, like, what is the link between APIs and AI today in this data swarm to this data symphony?
So let's take a step back. It's not just API and AI, it's data in general. So many of you would work with multiple third-party vendors, third-party data sources, including first-party data sources. But one of the key things to bear in mind is that when you look at third-party data sources, you need to be able to ingest that data into your environment, which generally is through an API. And your API basically is your messenger, right? And so if something breaks in that API or if something goes wrong, you go back to basically the source of truth to try and trace your steps back to what can be corrected, how do you correct it. So APIs play that pivotal role of transmitting that information into an environment where it can be used, it can be managed, but more importantly, it's structured and it helps you to actually deliver better insights. So the role of APIs is as important in your larger ecosystem as is data and ultimately the outcome of AI.
Yeah, it's true that, of course, sometimes we're biased by APIs or whatever, the interface to the data, but at the end, it's about the data, right? At the end, AI, APIs, services, at the end, it's about the data.
Correct. It is about the data. And interestingly, it's a good point that you raise because a lot of organizations have this FOMO with AI. Everyone wants to race into the AI paradigm and want to deliver AI initiatives. But really, if data isn't correct, if data isn't of good quality and doesn't have the fundamentals and the structures in place, your AI is pretty much a swamp. You're not going to get what you need out of it. You're not going to get the outcomes that you need if you don't trust your data. So my advice usually is that get your data right, understand your data foundations and fundamentals before you start chasing that AI dream.
So you see many organizations and you talk to many organizations. So can you give us a picture at what type of data swamp you're talking about?
Oh, it's a crazy swamp. So my previous organization, we had around 30 to 50 different data sources. And it was really messy, really crazy, because we were getting it from multiple areas, multiple third parties, and everyone had their own standardization. Every data source had its own standardization, its own practices. But eventually, when it entered our ecosystem, it was really just messy. It was like almost tangled wires and sitting everywhere. No one knew how it entered into the ecosystem, what was the source of truth, where was the first point of contact, what were the fields of information, the variables, the parameters that were really important to actually help make decisions. So when you think about swamp and the big gory swamp, it was really like that. It was just dirty data not being used in the best way possible, but also more importantly, it was data that we couldn't identify what was useful and meaningful to drive decisions. And this is probably one of the more important things, is that data is immense. We have petabytes, zettabytes of data, but the data that's actually meaningful and useful to make those decisions is quite tiny. But you have to try and work that out through that entire myriad of wires and data points and data sources that's fueling the ecosystem in which your data lies.
So let's say over the last 30, 40 years, all the analysts have been saying that the true goal of a company is its data, right? Yeah. The true value of its data. But so this treasure chest that every company has, actually, they don't have the key. It seems they don't have the key to open it. Yeah. At least to open it enough to have enough value. So, how governance helps maybe to be the first tooling to begin to open the treasure chest?
It helps to clean it up, right? It gives you the good standards and frameworks. So what are your business rules? What are the policies that need to be managed as part of your data layers? What are the different methodologies that you need to use to understand the structured data? Because you could just be sifting through all this data and it could just be flying away or floating away without any meaning to it, right? So that's one of the key issues. But governance really helps to add that layer of protection, but that layer, more importantly, of trust. Governance gives you the rules, it gives you the parameters, it gives you the fundamentals to really try to pull away the strings of the data that's caught up in this dirty mess. And once you have those principles and those frameworks clearly outlined with the guidelines, that's when you'll start to pick up data that's actually meaningful, or the data that's actually purposeful to your goals and your objectives. The goal is not just data, the goal is trusted data. And that's where governance comes in. A lot of people or organizations think when you bring governance into the picture, you're creating restrictions, you're creating limitations, and potentially you're losing the opportunity to really use the data in its form. But actually you're not. You're creating rules that help to develop clean data sets. And those clean data sets then help you to deliver insights. So this is the tricky part of it, is that a lot of organizations have a lot of data, but how many of them are actually delivering insights from that data that can actually help you tell that story, but more importantly, help you decide on your initiatives for the future as well as your strategy?
So yeah, it reminds me of the CIO who said that in his organization he makes a difference between the data, the information, and the insight. The data is the core static thing. The information is with its context. Yep. But the insight is to be able to make a decision, right? Correct. So that's I like it's interesting. So governance in this Symphony, governance is what? It's an instrument? Is it the sheet music, the music sheet? What is it?
It's a bit of everything. Governance is good management. That's what it is. It's good data management. And if you're looking at it from an orchestrational perspective, it's the way you're guided. And if you're going to a symphony, if any of you have been to one, it's the conductor, right? It's the person who's guiding you on how to use the musical notes and the musical instruments in sync, in a synergized way. And that's essentially what governance is doing. It's been around for many, many years. And it's been around in a structured format when we use mathematical equations, when we use statistics, when we use formulas. All of that is governance. But the reality is it's because we've got so much of data now, governance has taken on a different priority where it's actually proper structured frameworks to help you use your data more meaningfully. So again, governance goes back to being that conductor, that person who helps you create the synergy in a more meaningful way.
So in a symphony, you have many instruments, many musicians. Yeah, you have like one conductor.
Yep.
But let's say, so the goal is to keep cohesion between all of this, right?
Yep.
But sometimes you have maybe people who want the light for themselves. You have some soloists, right? And is AI the current soloist of the let's say big IT symphony these days?
Yeah, but again, you know, it can't be a soloist on its own in a way as well, right? It has to work in synergy with everything else. So yes, AI is kind of the outcome. It's the music, it's the final result that you hear, that you see, but all the aspects and layers that lead up to it are the musicians, the instruments, the notes, the practice, the rehearsals, all of that is part of that data journey, that life cycle, the technology, as well as the people who help to drive those AI initiatives or those AI outcomes. Because I think one of the things we need to bear in mind is that AI is an outcome, it's not really the journey.
So there's for me, the symphony metaphor, I like it because, you know, some people do music for fun or music for let's say the beauty and for like symphony, you know, as an orchestra. And for AI, there is often this saying where we say, are you doing AI for fun or AI for run? You know? Yeah. So this is, would you say that AI for fun is okay to try, but for run, the fact needs to be reliable, needs to be robust, it needs to be governed? This is where you see the difference?
Yeah, I agree. I think AI for fun is great. It's innovation. It's experimental. It allows you to explore avenues and areas you've never done before, you've never tried before. It allows you to work without rules in a way. It becomes a problem when you start to operationalize it or when you start to bring it into production. And when you bring it into production, that means it's becoming accessible to a much wider range of audiences and stakeholders that are not just within that experimental phase. And that's when governance really needs to come into play, because we know even in an experimental stage, AI can go rogue. Any experiment can go rogue, we know that. So you know, you need to bring in some principles, some guardrails in order to prevent it from really losing its course or taking a course that it shouldn't take. And so yes, AI for fun is important, it's great, it really helps to develop innovation and it should be encouraged, but with guardrails. But AI for real or for run really needs to have the proper guardrails. Otherwise, we'll just be losing direction, and we also won't necessarily be, you know, actually addressing outcomes. And to that, you know, I'll refer to the MIT report, which was mentioned yesterday. It's been mentioned over the last few months. It says the same thing, that 95% of AI projects are failing. And it's because we're not really solving the customer problem. We're not solving the pain points we should be solving. And that's where we really need to think about what are the AI outcomes we want to achieve and how are we servicing our stakeholders as well as our customers.
So in many organizations, what I've seen last 24 months is that you have the AI for fun aspect, like the where they, you know, they do the innovation part in a few weeks, few months, right? But when they submit that to CIO, to CISO, to governance board, right, or to governance authorities, they say, okay, we can't put that in production. We can't put that for prime time. We can't put that to the business. It's customer data. It's important. So you have to redo everything under the new governance rules. And so they lose 3 to 6 months of innovation because this was not in the framework since the beginning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So do you see that happening?
Yeah, I do. Because I think a lot of times, even when we go into experimental or innovation mode, we're not really thinking about what's the pain point or the problem we're solving. We're thinking this is fun and it's cool and I can do all of this, and it's, you know, it's the hype. And so a lot of innovators get, you know, really immersed into the fact that there's so many opportunities that we can try and work with. But at the end of the day, are those innovation initiatives, are those actual problems going back to the overall strategy on what the organization is striving for, but also the problem that the organization is trying to solve? And I think this is where we end up with things like tech debt and model debt. And a lot of models that sit just in the ecosystem and never get productionized. It's because we're experimenting, but to what end are we experimenting with value and with an actual outcome that will solve a problem? I might just, you know, give an example, if that's okay, of my own experience as a customer. So a few months ago, I unfortunately had my car break down, and I had to call my insurance provider to get the car towed, and called up the contact center and got served by an AI. The AI validated my information, which was actually correct, but then returned a result of saying, I can't validate you. Then I get served to a human. I get served to the human who was quite obnoxious and never really helped me, but also validated my information, knew my car, knew my address, knew the state of my home and how they had to enter the home to get the car out, all that detail. And lo and behold, it took me the whole day to get my car towed, 3 tow trucks. And none of them were the right fit for my car. And so again, if you just look at that, the customer pain point is that my problem wasn't solved, my time was wasted, and more importantly, I had AI and human have all the right information, but couldn't actually do anything meaningful with it. So yes, as a customer, what have they done by spending all the money on AI and human intervention, but not actually solve the customer problem? So that's one of the things that we have to think about, is that yes, we are implementing these solutions and it's great. We have great technologies, great AI capabilities, but are we really solving the customer problem? And in my perspective, no, because I think the way we've engaged with providers in the last 10 years hasn't fundamentally really changed. We still have the same pain points and the same negative experiences that we've had for 10 years.
So in this symphony, you have the conductor, you have the instrument. Like, who is, if governance is, conducting all of this, who is writing the music sheet? Who is how the rules are written? Should they be written by the business, by the tech, by the data teams? Is it a collaborative movement? Who is defining the policies?
It's collaborative. I mean, when you define policies, again, in governance, you need the intervention of advisors, legal teams, policymakers, risk, compliance. You need all of them to be a part of that journey. Otherwise, you just take a very siloed, narrow approach to solving the problem, if you are at all solving the problem. So again, it's very collaborative. And the reality is, I'm sure most of you would feel this, and raise of hands if you do, is that most of us still work in silos. Don't we think that? I see quite a few nodding heads, so that's great. So most of us still work in silos, but actually AI initiatives are very collaborative, but they're also very diverse. And we would have noticed that with AI results that are being generated more recently, a lot of biases are involved in the results, but also a lot of considerations haven't been taken into those results. So again, you need to have different perspectives, different values, different ethics that are part of that model. Only then can it really resonate a bit more closely with your audience. It doesn't mean it'll solve the problem 100%, but it'll at least have a result that is more reflective of the problem that's being solved.
Let's say, so we said AI is potentially a soloist, right? Extremely talented soloist. But sometimes governance may be I don't know for you here in the room, but maybe seen also as a word like boring, that's what impedes me actually to go fast. That impedes me to innovate, to try, right? What would you say for these soloists in organizations to say that, look, yeah, governance is actually a bigger deal, a bigger prize, for all?
Yeah, I'd say it's like anything, right? People think engineering is boring. People think data is boring. People think anything tech is boring, except for the fact that unless it's entertaining. So unless you're watching Instagram or YouTube, only then is it really entertaining and useful. But all of that is actually driven by technology. So I would say as technologists, those who work with technology and understand it really well, it's definitely not boring. But to those who are the non-technologists, you have to make it entertaining. You have to make it interesting. So something I designed when it comes to governance is I've actually created a organizational persona for governance. What does a personalized or a human approach to governance look like? So I'm from a marketing background. So of course, being in marketing, a lot of the information that we do is to reflect the brand, but also to resonate with the customer. So what I did was I took a different spin on governance by creating a persona in governance so that everyone in the organization can look at governance from the perspective of me as a steward, me as an owner, and what does this mean to me from a governance perspective, rather than just a blanket rule that says governance is policy, it's management, it's rules. No one's going to listen to you. But if you start to add some character to it, and if you start to add some key points and items that actually talk about what governance means to you, to your brand, and to your organization, the dial changes. because then you actually resonate with it. You're not going into the deep dive details of the frameworks, but you're actually going into the aspect of what does responsible data look like and what does it mean to me in my role. So creating a persona really changes that dial. And that's something I thought was useful, but again, if it's being used more widely, then I know it's definitely useful. So yeah.
So in these large organizations, you have a lot of data everywhere, exposed to other silos, at least, but by APIs, to break the silos, and AI may be consuming them to deliver business applications. Like, how do you harmonize all of this for the Symphony?
I don't think we ever get to a point of complete harmony because, again, I go back to the whole silo conversation. I think you can reach an outcome, you can reach a point of it, which is breaking down those silos, working more collaboratively, bringing in the business units that really want to have their problem solved. I think at the end of the day, you have to pick and choose business units with the biggest pain points, but also really quick wins on those pain points. The moment you start to resolve that, that's when you'll start to achieve some symphony. Because bear in mind, at that top level, at the C-suite level, they're not really worried about governance until and unless it becomes a problem and until and unless there's reputational damage. But you have to educate it from here to there for them to take it seriously and get that symphony. So it's really an ongoing journey. It's not a project. It's not something you set and forget and you hope it'll work its way. It's actually something that is continuous, ongoing, and has to be worked at constantly every day. Because the models that you build need the governance. The problems that you're solving for stakeholders need good advice, good rules. But to create that symphony, you need to bring it all together. And as an analyst or a data team or an engineer, or generally as an overarching data and engineering team, it's your job to educate that. Because only the technical teams know it best. But again, the leaders need to be able to drive those conversations and have clear communication and change management when it actually comes to bringing it all together. So change management, I would say, is a key part of that symphony.
So maybe last question before we may take a question from the audience. We said boring in the sense that everything someone else is doing is potentially boring, in an organization. But there is this term that I've discovered from the API space, which is, we used to say integration. You used to integrate APIs, integrate services or integrate applications. And we've seen a shift when we had this idea of APIs as a product, about consumption. If it's cool enough, designed enough, available enough, clean enough, you don't integrate, which is boring. You consume, which is there is a value into consumption, right? Mm-hmm. Should you say that to start, because everything starts with the data, should you say the data should be a product?
Yeah, absolutely. Data should be a product. It should be a product in every organization because then I think you start to shift the mindset. At the moment, just a raise of hands, how many of you still look at data as a reporting capability? Me. How many of you still use spreadsheets as your data product? There you go, right? So if you start thinking about it from that sense, we're not using data as it really should be used. We're using it just as a mechanism to collate variables and parameters and numbers and start drawing pivot tables. That's not data. That is not data in any sense in the way we should be really using it to drive insightful decisions. So that mindset really needs to change. And the way you change it is we're starting to create those data product structures, but starting to have conversations on a product level. Because again, when we start looking at dashboards or graphs or any sort of report, we start thinking very technical. And we start thinking, I have to be a programmer or a coder, and I need to stitch joins, and I need to bring in SQL, Python, so many different techniques and methodologies and skills. But actually, when you start thinking with a product mindset, you start thinking with a diversified management mindset. And you're not just thinking about the technical aspects, but you're also thinking about the outcomes, which is the insights and how you provide recommendations, but also how do you end up driving the strategy and the strategic value of the organization. So just as you have a product category for any of the services and products that you're selling, you have to have data as a product embedded into the organization so that it's also a part of your strategy.
So we have time for one question if someone wants to raise a question about governance. Yeah.
Have you thought about governance in terms of probability? Okay, so for example, I asked Grok this morning, who was leading the Formula One championships.
Yep.
And it said Max Verstappen in July 2024.
Yep.
So it followed the process, but the data was useless.
That's because, yeah, it's probably synthesizing data from various sources, but it's not actually making an intelligent prediction, which probably a model, bespoke model, that looks at specific data points for Formula One would provide a more accurate measure, whereas LLMs are just synthesizing what's already out there.
A quick another one, yeah.
Like when it's a product, as we have been speaking, what can you maybe visualize it for us to have?
Can you reformulate the question?
So the question was, what does data as a product really look like?
Yes.
Right? That's your question. So data as a product takes on many of those forms. It's essentially, think about Instagram, right? We all know Instagram, right? And Instagram is a product. It's a product of Meta, but it has all these different capabilities, features, structures that then allows you to use it in different ways as reels, as posts, as images. That's what data as a product is. It's a product that a company delivers to you to service your needs.
So like softwares are data, right?
Correct. Software is a data product, but it is an element of a data product. It's not the all-encompassing data product. That's your Instagram, because it pulls in all the different features, it pulls in all the different variables, everything to serve to you a final product. So data as a product is a final consumption of various aspects. So it could be dashboards, visualizations, reports, prediction, models, but it's serving it to you in a format that's consumable.
Because you consume.
Sorry? Yeah, it could be a product. May not necessarily be only a data product, but it's an amalgamation of various features to deliver that product.
And thank you very much. We reached our time, but thank you very much,
Thank
Sue.
you.
Governance. It was important to start this track with governance because it may be the let's say, framework for all what will be happening next.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.